Good day, everyone. Before we start our today's discussion, I would like to introduce ourselves first. My name is Efraim F. Manzon.
I am Shanday Buca.
I am Jandayan.
I am Henry L. Hype.
I am John Patrick F. Aparte.
I am Clent, Gerald, Silvano.
I am Bryan named Sumeguin.
I am Japp Alvarez.
And together, we are the Group 1. So, on today's discussion, we will talk about the physical self, heredity, and environment. So, what can you learn on this discussion? First, you will know what is genes, specifically the dominant gene and recessive gene. Second one, you will understand someone's physical growth development and their maturation. The third one, we will identify for you which of the natural biohazard that can harm our physical self. And lastly, we will discuss what is difference of physical self and self-concept. So now, let's talk about heredity. So what is heredity? Let me answer that thought for you. So heredity is the ability to pass on of physical or mental characteristic of someone genetically from one generation to another. Basically, it is the sum of all biological processes by which particular characteristics are transmitted from parents to their offsprings. One of the basic unit of heredity is genes. Genes occupies a specific location on the chromosome. Each consists of nucleotides arranged in a linear manner. Most genes are code for a specific protein and segment of protein leading to particular characteristic of function. So, who invented gene? So, in 19th century, it was common believed that an organism trait were passed on to offspring in a blend of characteristics donated by each parent. Gregor Mendel is known to be the father of genetics. Heredity was poorly understood in general and the concept of gene did not exist at all. However, Australian monk Gregor Mendel was unconvinced with traditional explanation of how traits were passed from one generation to another. Between 1856 and 1863, Mendel decided to try and work out the principle of heredity himself, with the assistance of the humble garden P, or what they call Pisum sativum. Among the many species on which Mendel worked, he selected P because the plant and seeds have a wide array of distinct features that occurs in two easily identifiable forms. Example, seed shape, round or wrinkle, plant height, tall or short. Over 8 years, Mendel studied P traits one at a time and cross variants to systematically record how traits were passed from one generation to the next. A mammoth task that involved approximately 28,000 pea plants. A component of gene are made up of alleles. So what is alleles actually? An allele is one or two or more version of gene. An individual or a person inherit two alleles for each gene, one from each parent. If two alleles are the same, the individual is homozygous for that gene. If the alleles are different, the individual is heterozygous. Though the term allele was originally used to describe variation genes, it now also referred to variation among non-coding DNA sequence. Speaking of DNA, what is DNA? A DNA is a molecule inside cell that contains a genetic information responsible for the development and function of an organism. DNA molecules allow this information to be passed from one generation to the next. DNA is made up of double-stranded helix held together by weak hydrogen bond between purine, pyrimidine, nucleotide base pairs. Adenine paired with thymine and guanine paired with cytosine, also called deoxyribonucleic acid. Again, the meaning of DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. So now, let's move on to dominant and recessive gene. There are two types of gene. There is a genotypes and phenotypes. Let's now identify what is the definition of genotypes. A genotype is an individual collection of genes. The term also can refer to the two alleles inherited for a particular gene. A genotype is expressed when the information encoded in the gene or DNA is used to make protein and RNA molecule. The expression of the genotype contributes to the individual observable trait called the phenotype. Let me clear things out. So, an example of genotype is the eye color. A gene encodes eye color. In this example, the allele is either brown or blue, with one inherited from mother and one inherited from the father. The brown allele is dominant. The blue allele is recessive. If the child inherits two different alleles, then they will have brown eyes. For the child to have blue eyes, they must be homozygous for the blue eye allele. Other example of genotype includes hair color, heights, shoe size. So that's it. And then next is, now you know what is genotype, what is the difference of phenotype. So a phenotype is the sum of organism observed characteristic is their phenotype. A key difference between phenotype and genotype is that whilst genotype is inherited from organism parents, the phenotype is not. Whilst phenotype is influenced the genotype. Genotype does not equal phenotype. The phenotype is influenced by the genotype and factor including this example. Environmental factors that may influence the phenotype include nutrition, temperature, humidity, and stress. Flamingos are a classic example of how environment influences the phenotype. While it's renowned for being vibrantly pink, their natural color is white. The pink color is caused by pigment in the organism in their diet. A second example is an individual's skin color. Our gene control the amount and type of melanin that we produce. However, exposure to UV light in sunny climates causes the darkening of existing melanin and encourages increased melogenesis and thus darker skin. Now we know what are the type of gene. Let's now dive into dominant and recessive gene. A dominant gene refers to a relationship between two versions of gene. Individual receive two versions of each gene known as allele. For each parent, if the allele of a gene are different, one allele will be expressed. It is the dominant gene. The effect of the other allele called recessive. It makes therefore the term dominant. Refers to the relationship that exists between two versions of gene. If one dominant of the other must be subordinate, in that case, it is referred to as recessive.
There are two components of gene, the homozygous and heterozygous. A homozygous is a presence of two identical alleles at a particular gene locus. A homozygous genotype may include two normal alleles or two alleles that have same variant, while heterozygous is a presence of two different alleles at a particular gene locus. A heterozygous genotype may include one normal allele and one mutated allele or two different mutated alleles. What is homozygous dominant? A genotype of an organism with two dominant alleles for a trait is said to have a homozygous dominant genotype. Using the eye color example, this genotype is written with big DD. This is the type of gene where you can see two alleles that is purely dominant. Now, what is heterozygous dominant? A genotype of an organism with one dominant allele and one recessive allele is said to have a heterozygous genotype. In our example, this genotype is written with big D small d or small d big D. Basically, it is a type of a gene where you can see one recessive and one dominant allele in either left or right. And that is for dominant gene. Let's move on to recessive gene. What is a recessive gene? Basically, recessive is a quality found in a relationship between two versions of a gene. Individuals receive one version of a gene called an allele from each parent. If the alleles are different, the dominant gene will be expressed, while the effect of the other allele called recessive is masked. In the case of a recessive genetic disorder, An individual must inherit two copies of a mutated allele in order for the disease to be present. Therefore, recessive alleles are those that do not manifest in an individual unless both of the individual's copies of the gene have the genotype. It is frequently used in conjunction with the Punnett square and the other type of Mendelian genetics, and it is frequently equated with a dominant pattern of inheritance, in which if one has one copy of a gene, regardless of what the other copy is, the dominant allele will manifest itself. In the case of a recessive allele, the individual will exhibit the trait associated with the genotype only if both alleles are identical and have that specific recessive characteristics. The recessive trait may now be or of no functional consequence. This causes difference between people, such as different in eye color or hair color, but it can also refer to a disease. For example, in cystic fibrosis, a very common Mendelian disorder. The disorder exists only when both genes that corresponds to cystic fibrosis are faulty. If there is only one mutation, the normal allele can compensate for the recessive mutation. However, when both functions are lost, the disease manifests as a recessive disease with the loss of a function that thus observable disease. What is homozygous recessive? It is a genotype of an organism with two recessive alleles is called homozygous recessive. In the eye color, for example, this genotype is written small dd. So there is it. Homozygous recessive is a two non-dominant allele. Therefore, all in all, the summary of our report and Mendel's concept of segregation and independence assortment, which indicates that individuals have two alleles and that a parent only passes one allele to his or her offspring, as well as that the inheritance of one pair of factors is independent of the inheritance of the other pair, can explain many genetics differences. Alleles in a gene pair might interact in a dominant or recessive manner, or they can be silent. These ideas or notions, however, can be used to forecast the future or, at the very least, the result of a certain process. So now you know what a dominant and recessive gene. Let's now understand someone's physical growth, development, and their mutation.
I am Henry L. Hype Jr. Maturation. Maturation is the process by which we change, grow, and develop throughout life. Developmental psychologists look at many different types of maturation throughout the lifespan. The types of maturation that we'll focus in this lesson are physical maturation, cognitive maturation, emotional maturation, and spiritual maturation. Physical maturation. Physical maturation focuses on the physical changes that occurs as we age. For example, at birth we mainly use reflexes and interact with the world. Sucking is a reflex that allows us to take in nutrition. As we get older, we do not rely on our reflexes as much because we develop gross motor skills such as crawling, sitting up, walking, and running. We also develop fine motor skills for things like writing and drawing. We grow taller and our weight increases. We go from being infants to toddlers to kids to adolescents and finally adults. Surprisingly, true, we do not stop maturing once we become adults. Through the process of senescence or aging, we move from early adulthood. Physical changes happen in each of these stages. They are examples of physical maturation. Cognitive maturations. Cognitive maturation is the way we change our thinking patterns throughout the lifespan. This refers to the cognitive development of children from birth to adulthood. It refers to how babies think, learn, interact with their environment, etc. Some important aspects of cognitive development is the process of information, language development, reasoning skills, development of intellect, and memory. An example of maturation is becoming an adult with a career and other responsibilities. The final differentiation process in biological system, such as the final ripening of a seed or the attainment of full function capacity by a cell, a tissue, or an organ. Emotional maturity. Emotional immaturity, on the other hand, is a tendency to express emotions without restraint or disproportionately to the situation. In other words, emotional behavior that is out of control or not appropriate to the situation can be considered immature. It's more like the emotional reaction you might expect to see from a child than from an adult. Emotionally immature people may not have a good sense of the future or how to plan for it, refusing to take on significant responsibilities like committed relationships, careers, or investments, like how homeowners are signs of avoiding responsibility. People like this might let others take care of them, way beyond the point that they should be self-sufficient. This is something called Peter Pan syndrome, after the fictional character who never wanted to grow. Spiritual maturation. Spiritual development, in essence, is to believe in something beyond the material universe and to develop an awareness of realities beyond the confines of time and space. Spiritual growth enhances our ability to deal with life ups and downs and bounce back from those difficult experiences. It is easy to look at others with judgment and criticism, but when we start grow spiritually, we realize how much healthier it is to cultivate compassion and understanding for others instead. It's what the universe gives you in return to your purposeful questions, awakened mind, and desire to grow spiritually. You may feel distant from some of your friends because of the different energies levels you have. You feel the urge to do great things. You realize you just know things you didn't know before.
So, my name is Bryan Sumeguin, and we are going to discuss about physical growth development. So, what is physical growth? Physical growth refers to the increase in height and weight in the other body, changes that happens as a kid matures. So, how does heredity and environment affect the growth and development of a child? Heredity influences the different aspects of growth and development. For example, height, weight, and structure of the body, color of hair and eye, intelligence, interest, and certain behaviors. So there are three broad stages of development. First is early childhood, middle childhood, and adolescence. So as we tackle these three broad stages, I will just proceed on the explanation, and I will not base on the PowerPoint that is presented on the screen. Early childhood. So early childhood is basically between birth and the age 3. A child typically doubles in height and quadruples in weight. Bodily proportions also shift so that the infant, whose head accounts for almost 1/4 of total body length, becomes a toddler with a more balanced, adult-like appearance. Despite these rapid physical changes, the typical 3-year-old has mastered many skills, including sitting, walking, toilet training, using a spoon, scribbling, and sufficient hand-eye coordination to catch and throw a ball. So, middle childhood, 8 to 12 years. Perhaps The image of a middle childhood as a latency stage, physically development during middle childhood is less dramatic than in early childhood or adolescence. Growth is slow and steady until the onset of puberty, when individuals begin to develop at a much quicker pace. The age at which individuals enter puberty varies, but there is evidence of a secular trend. The age at which puberty begins has been decreasing over time. In some individuals, puberty may start as early as 8 or 9. Onset of puberty differs across gender and begins early in females. As with physical development, the cognitive development of middle childhood is slow and steady. Children in this stage are building upon skills gained in early childhood and preparing for the next phase of their cognitive development. Children's reasoning is very rule-based. Children are learning skills such as classifications of forming hypotheses, while they are cognitively more mature now than a few years ago. Children in this stage still require concrete, hands-on learning activities. Middle childhood is a time when children can gain enthusiasm for learning and working for achievement, can become a motivating factor as children work toward building confidence and self-esteem. So, let's proceed to adolescence. 12 to 18 years. So, adolescence is an important period for cognitive development, as well as it marks a transition in the way in which individuals think and reason about problems and ideas. In early adolescence, individuals can classify and order objects, reverse processes, think logically about concrete objects, and consider more than one perspective at a time. However, at this level of development, adolescents benefit more than from direct experience than from abstract ideas and principles. As adolescents develop more complex cognitive skills, they gain the ability to solve more abstract and hypothetical problems. As individuals enter adolescence, they are confronted by a diverse number of changes all at one time. Not only are they undergoing significant physical and cognitive growth, but they are also encountering new situations, responsibilities, and people. So, the next topic will be discussed by Henry about maturation. So, proceed to the next slide, please.
Having a proper well-being and progressive nourishment is a very important aspect of staying healthy. Eating proper foods, getting updated on your vaccine, and sleeping well are some of the simple things you can do to be healthy. Complex activities include exercising 5 times a week. Running or doing yoga can be a hassle. However, can be very beneficial to the body. So in this topic, Patrick Aparte and I are going to tackle about the several specific environmental issues that can impede human health and wellness. These issues include chemical pollution, air pollution, climate change, disease-causing microbes, lack of access to healthcare, poor infrastructure, and poor water quality. To start, different chemicals can impact human health in different ways, and often, exposure to dangerous or foreign substances create health vulnerabilities. Although some chemical exposures are safe, others are not. A certain amount of a harmful chemical must enter your body to make you sick. Harmful chemicals can get into your body if you breathe, eat, or drink them. This is a critical field of public health. According to WHO, more than 1.6 million deaths in 2016 were due to exposure to selected chemicals. Some examples of dangerous chemicals in the environment are heavy metals and toxins that find their way into the water supply, harmful pesticides that make their way into the food supply chain, or concentrated chemicals that are used for cleaning and other household uses. Next, as the world gets hotter and more crowded, our engines continue to pump out dirty emissions, and half the world has no access to clean fuels or technologies. The very air we breathe is growing dangerously polluted. 9 out of 10 people now breathe polluted air, which kills 7 million people every year. The health effects of air pollution are serious. 1/3 of deaths from stroke, lung cancer, and heart disease are due to air pollution. This is having an equivalent effect to that of smoking tobacco and much higher than, say, the effects of eating too much salt. Studies have shown that air pollution effect on humans are a significant public health concern, not only because of their role in climate change, but also because exposure to air pollution can increase morbidity and mortality. Another factor to consider are climate changes and natural disaster. Climate change is the single biggest health threat facing humanity. It disrupts the natural world in several ways that can impede health and increase vulnerability to disease. These include increase in the planet's temperature and more frequent heavy rains and runoff. Additionally, climate change increases the frequency of natural disasters, often having a ravenous effect on homes and communities and sometimes resulting in loss of life. Climate change is already impacting health in a myriad of ways, including by leading to death and illness from increasingly frequent extreme weather events such as heat waves, storms, and floods, the disruption of food systems, increase in zoonoses and food, water, and vector-borne diseases, and mental health issues. What is more are diseases caused by microbes, also known as microorganisms. These present another area of public health concern. Trillions of microbes exist within the human body, and they also live in water, soil, and air. A few harmful microbes, for example, less than 1% of bacteria, can invade our body and make us ill. Harmful microbes, which are more commonly called pathogens or germs, can affect humans and cause illnesses. Eating is one of the primary ways in which humans can contract diseases caused by microbes. One example is food poisoning from E. coli, a type of bacteria that can be found in the environment and in foods, and which can cause respiratory illness, urinary tract infections, and other adverse health effects.
Another environmental factor that contributes to disease and overall poor health outcomes is living in an area with a lack of access to healthcare services. According to Healthy People, many people face barriers that prevent or limit access to needed healthcare services, which may increase the risk of poor health outcomes and health disparities. Some factors that contribute to lack of access to healthcare are economic instability, unreliable transportation to clinical facilities, and simple lack of education about the importance of preventive care. Inadequate health insurance coverage is one of the largest barriers to healthcare access, and the unequal distribution of coverage contributes to disparities in health. Affordable health insurance is part of the solution, but factors like economic, social, cultural, and geographic barriers to healthcare must also be considered, as well as new strategies to increase the efficiency of healthcare delivery. Next is infrastructure issues. Infrastructure is the physical foundation, the facilities and structures of what our society needs to operate. This includes roads, highways, buildings, bridges, water, and energy. Cities around the United States are dealing with outdated and aging infrastructure. As a country, we must invest in infrastructure for a better future, and we must do so responsibly and equitably. If you think the infrastructure and public are not related, think again. Poor infrastructure has been linked with lead poisoning, accidents, and injuries, and asthma. Infrastructure issues can also have a major impact on community health. Examples include the following: poorly maintained roads, lack of access to clean drinking water, lack of local healthcare infrastructure, such as clinics capable of giving vaccinations. Overcoming poor infrastructure requires the right allocation of resources from local, state, and federal governments, as well as a qualified workforce to keep infrastructure properly maintained. Insufficient infrastructure has been a major constraint to economic growth and poverty reduction in the Philippines. Though the country has a relatively high access levels to water, sanitation, and electricity service levels have failed to keep up with rapid population growth, and urbanization. Infrastructure development in the country is hampered by a poor business environment, weakness in planning, coordination, and financing, and a decrease in the private sector involvement in infrastructure provision. Next is poor water quality. Surface waters and aquifers can be contaminated by various chemicals, microbes, and radionuclides. Disinfection of drinking water has dramatically reduced the prevalence of waterborne diseases in the United States. Other processes may also be used to treat drinking water depending on the characteristics of and contaminants in the source water. Very Well Health reports that across the world, more than 780 million people don't have access to clean drinking water. Shockingly, about a third of the world's population lacks access to proper sanitation. The health implications are sobering. Each day, more than 2,200 children die due to diseases caused by poor water quality. Several factors can contribute to poor water quality, including industrial waste and pollution, lack of access to proper water treatment and sanitation services, and outdated plumbing infrastructure. If drinking water contains unsafe levels of contaminants, it can cause health effects such as gastrointestinal diseases, nervous system or reproductive effects, and chronic diseases such as cancer. Factors that can influence whether a contaminant will lead to health effects include the type of contaminant, its concentration in the water, individual susceptibility, the amount of water consumed, and the duration of exposure. Chemical exposure through drinking water can lead to a variety of short and long-term health effects. Exposure to high doses of chemicals can lead to skin discoloration or more severe problems such as nervous system or organ damage and developmental or reproductive effects. Exposure to lower doses over long periods of time can lead to chronic, longer-term conditions such as cancer. The effects of some drinking water contaminants are not yet well understood. Most life-threatening waterborne diseases caused by microbes are rare in the United States today. The more common illnesses caused by viruses, bacteria, and parasites can result in stomach pain, vomiting, diarrhea, headache, fever, and kidney failure. Infectious diseases such as hepatitis can also occur. Hepatitis may be severe in people with weakened immune systems and sometimes fatal in people with severely compromised immune systems. And lastly, global environmental issues account for more than 6 million deaths each year, according to World Health Organization data. Although it is unequivocal that climate change affects human health, it remains challenging to accurately estimate the scale and impact of many climate-sensitive health risks. However, scientific advances progressively allow us to attribute an increase in morbidity and mortality to human-induced warming and more accurately determine the risk and scale of these health threats. May I proceed to Japp Alvarez for the physical self and self-concept?
Hi guys, today we will tackle about self-concept, and so let's get started. So who are you? What makes you? You might answer with I'm a mother, or I'm a therapist, or maybe I'm a believer, I'm a good friend, I'm a brother. Maybe you answer with I am excellent at my job, I'm an accomplished musician, or I'm a successful athlete. Other responses might fall into the category of traits. I'm a kind-hearted person, I'm intelligent and hardworking, or I'm laid back and easygoing. These responses come from your internal sense of who you are. This sense is developed early in life, but it goes through constant evaluation and adjustment throughout the lifespan. In psychology, this sense of self has a specific term: self-concept. A person's self-image is based on how they see themselves, while self-concept is a more comprehensive evaluation of the self, largely based on how a person sees themselves, values themselves, thinks about themselves, and feels about themselves. Self-concept is an overarching idea we have about who we are, physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually, and in terms of any other aspects that make up who we are. We form and regulate our self-concept as we grow, based on the knowledge we have about ourselves. It is multidimensional and can be broken down into these individual aspects. For example, you may have a very different idea of who you are in terms of your physical body and in who you are in terms of your spirit or soul. Self-concept is related to several other constructs such as self-esteem, self-image, self-efficacy, and self-awareness. In this following section, we will explain these slight yet important differences. Self-concept versus self-esteem. Self-concept is not self-esteem, although self-esteem may be a part of self-concept. Self-concept is the perception that we have of ourselves, or our answer when we ask ourselves the question, "Who am I?" It is knowing about one's own tendencies, thoughts, preferences, and habits, skills, and areas of weakness. According to Carl Rogers, founder of Clent-centered therapy, self-concept is an overarching construct that self-esteem is one of the components of it. So next, self-concept versus self-image. Self-image is related to self-concept, but is less broad. You see, self-image is how an individual sees themselves and it does not have to align with reality. A person's self-image is based on how they see themselves, while self-concept is a more comprehensive evaluation of the self, largely based on how a person sees themselves, values themselves, thinks about themselves, and feels about themselves. Carl Rogers posited that self-image is a component of self-concept, along with self-esteem or self-worth, and one's ideal self. So next, self-concept versus self-efficacy. Self-concept is a more complex construct than self-efficacy. While self-efficacy refers to an individual's judgments of their own abilities, self-concept is more general and includes both cognitive thoughts about and affective feelings about judgments about oneself. So next is self-concept versus self-awareness. Self-awareness also influences self-concept. It is the quality or trait that involves conscious awareness of one's own thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and traits. To have a full developed self-concept and one that is based in reality, a person must have at least some level of self-awareness.
Okay, so on my part, I will now elaborate to you what is physical self. What is the concept of physical self? The individual's impression of oneself in terms of physical abilities and attractiveness is referred to as physical self-concept. Physical ability relates to things like strength and endurance, whereas appearance refers to things like beauty and body image. The body, this magnificent container and complicated, highly tuned system through which we interact with our surroundings and other humans, is referred to as the physical self. The physical self is the physical solid component of a person that can be witnessed and investigated firsthand. The biological and environmental variables that shape the physical self are identified and explained in this presentation. It also looks at the socio-cultural aspects of physical well-being. So, the physical self is shaped by biological and environmental factors. It is surrounded by issues associated with health, hygiene, nutrition, and standards of beauty, among others. Biology and environment work together to yield cultural differences in behaviors such as young children's sleep patterns and attainment of developmental milestones such as sitting and walking. Heredity is defined as the transmission of traits from parents to offspring. The traits are made up of specific information embedded within one's gene. The transmission of qualities from parents to offspring is referred to as heredity. Traits are made up of specific information that is encoded in person's gene. The idea of heredity incorporates two seemingly contradictory characteristics about organisms: a species consistency from generation to generation, and individual variation within a species. As the science of genetics demonstrates, constancy and variation are two sides of the same coin. Genes can account for both elements of heredity. The maturation of a genetic feature inside an organism, or the unfolding of an individual's innate traits or potential. So, adolescence begins with the onset of sexual puberty and lasts until the shift from the childhood to young adulthood is complete. The beginning is biologically defined by the commencement of puberty, which normally occurs between the 10th and 13th years of life. The end can be early as 16 years old or as late as 20 years old, depending on environmental circumstances. In addition, adolescence is a phase of rapid anatomical and psychological change, as well as rapid social and psychosexual change, with immense turbulence caused by feelings of inadequacy, increased sexual and violent impulses. Internal disorder and the desire to achieve self-control. Adolescence is a phase of rapid anatomical and psychological change, as well as rapid psychosocial and psychosexual change, with immense turbulence caused by feelings of inadequacy, increased sexual and violent impulses, internal disorder, and the desire to achieve self-control. So, environmental conditioning. As you grow up, you are exposed to the environmental influences that shape your physical self, including those from your social works, social expectations, and cultural practices. Family, being your first social group, forms a crucial foundation of your development, including that of your physical self. As you grow older, you get exposed to a larger social group with new practices and standards. As a result, you may begin engaging in acts that would make you attractive and acceptable to others. One aspect of physical beauty is a person's body type. Contemporary media has portrayed slim bodies as the ideal body type for women and muscular bodies for men. Thus, adolescents indulge in activities that would enable them to achieve these ideal body types. As you grow older, you get exposed to a larger social group with new practices and standards. As a result, you may begin engaging in acts that would make you attractive and acceptable to others. However, some adolescents may resort to unhealthy habits just to achieve the ideal body type. It is important to remember that physical beauty is only skin deep, that what matters is feeling good about oneself and embracing a healthy perception of one's physical worth. Achieving physical well-being, healthy eating, following a healthy diet results in healthy skin, ideal weight, and better stamina. Embracing a healthy lifestyle, physical activities such as walking, running, going to the gym, and engaging in sports also contribute to a healthier body. Maintaining proper hygiene, taking care of your body by consistently following a hygiene regime can also help you feel good about yourself. Being confident, be secure in yourself, embrace a positive outlook towards various situations and problems, and love and accept who you are. I think that is all for physical self, and that's all. Thank you, guys.